assaulting the narrative, destroying their lives, unearthing the truth. I want the truth! This is The Truth with John Gordon.
Welcome to The Truth. In just 8 days remaining until Donald Trump regains the White House, I just continue to hope and pray that he is able to stay safe and that we can get him inaugurated in just a little over a week now. And that will be a great day for this country. In the meantime, Donald Trump did go to Washington on Thursday to attend Jimmy Carter's funeral. And there were moments of levity that occurred in the funeral. The first, one of the moments of levity would have been when Jason Carter was eulogizing his grandfather. And here's what he had to say about a phone call he received one day.
Eventually, he did get a cell phone, and one time he called me sort of early on in that process. And on my phone, it said, "Papa Mobile." So I answered it, of course. I said, "Hey, Papa." He said, "Who's this?" I said, "This is Jason." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing anything. You called me." He said, "I didn't call you. I'm taking a picture." It was nuclear engineer, right? I mean...
So that brought a lot of laughter among the congregation. But the really interesting thing, if you did not see the funeral, was when George W. Bush entered his pew with his wife. And when they did so, they walked right by Melania, and Donald Trump did not even say hello. But then George W. kind of playfully punched Obama in the chest, like, "How you been, old pal?" And they smiled at one another, and Bush took his seat. He did not speak to anybody else. It was awkward because he was sitting next to Hillary Clinton, and then Bill Clinton was on the end. Then, if you thought that was awkward, the Bidens arrived and took their seat on the first row in their pew, and no one acknowledged them. Kamala Harris was already seated, and Jill Biden came in and sat down next to Kamala Harris, did not make eye contact, did not say hello, sat next to her icily, and behind her, what was really, and those of you who are watching on the live stream on Getter and YouTube, we're playing a clip of that for you. Our radio listeners, you can join us on Getter, on the John Fredericks feed, or you can join us on YouTube right now. You can come there and hit the live button, search for John Gordon Truth. You can join us and watch the live stream. We also come to you each Saturday, not only on the John Fredericks Radio Network in 10 cities now, including cities in West Virginia, but also on CDM Press, and on their 13 digital platforms. They live stream as well on Rumble and Getter. So you got a lot of options. Of course, we'd like you to watch our channel and subscribe and like to us. All right. Anyway, if you're watching on the live stream, you can see when Jill Biden came in, she didn't say hello, Kamala. She didn't acknowledge her presence. Kamala sat there. Nobody, literally no one that I observed spoke to Kamala and her husband. I guess that's part of the consequence of losing an election. I've got some other thoughts on why no one spoke to her. But so Bush comes in, gives Obama a friendly nudge, disrespects President, soon to be 47th President Trump and Melania. I don't know what Melania did to them, and I thought that Ms. Bush was more gracious than that. But anyway, so they sit next to Obama to our left as we're viewing Obama's right. Where was Obama's wife? Nowhere in sight. Obama was traveling solo. No one has explained that. And so then Bush sits down, and what is really interesting, what was interesting and I actually liked is that for a few minutes, Trump and Obama conversed with one another in very familial ways. I mean, it was like they were long lost buddies. They were sitting there. They were both smiling. They were relaxed. And I think that was really good for our country, and I'd like to see more of it, frankly. But it also made me realize that a lot of this is just acting and role-playing when Trump talks about Obama in such uncharitable ways, and then Obama talks about Trump and calls him Hitler and a fascist. They certainly didn't act towards one another the way that they talk about one another, which just left me thinking, okay, it's all an act, except for when they were sitting there in church. That did not appear to be an act at all. That appeared to be people who may genuinely actually like one another. But what was really comical, and you can see Laura Bush sitting in her pew watching it all unfold. She was smiling the whole time, by the way. She was like, oh, this soap opera is really good and I'm enjoying it. Kamala turns around and looks at Obama and Trump yakking it up, smiling and then seemingly enjoying themselves with each other. And the look on her face was one of, I am not happy. This is not cool. Meanwhile, Miss Bush, Laura Bush, is just sitting there smiling ear to ear. So Jimmy Carter was not a successful president. And I was actually invited on a number of radio shows across the country and podcasts to talk about Jimmy Carter. I did have the privilege of being with him on many, many occasions over a 30-year span. I first met him when I was 14. The only time I really spent any significant time with him was when I went to Plains about a month after he left the White House and was with a group of executives from Lanier Business Products, along with our chairman, and we presented him a Lanier word processor. Those of you who are millennials probably don't know what I'm talking about, but a word processor actually replaced the typewriter. Again, you'll have to go to the Smithsonian to find one, but the word processor was really large. It was, I don't know, three feet tall and probably 3 feet wide. And you would sit there and you would type onto a screen, and then you'd have to hit the save button and it would record what you've typed on to a floppy disk. There were no hard drives then. We used these things called floppy disks that you would stick into the drive on the word processor. But anyway, we gave President Carter a word processor. He wrote his memoir. He and Rosalind Carter wrote their memoir. So we spent, memory serves, about 4 hours with him. We spent a good hour and a half with him at his house on his porch, where I had watched famous scenes of him interviewing cabinet members for his presidency. 4 years later, we're sitting on that very porch. And then we traveled over to Miss Lillian's house, where we installed the word processor, and that's where he and Rosalind would write their memoirs. So it was a real special privilege to have had that time with President Carter. I liked him. Every time I met him, I liked him. He was a very nice person. A lousy president. He had a lot of choices when he was president. People say, well, he was the worst president of our lifetime, and Joe Biden stole that title from him. But I do not like linking Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden in that way. Because yes, Jimmy Carter was not a successful president. He had choices to make. We had runaway inflation. He inherited it. He inherited it from Gerald Ford, who had a slogan called WIN. It stood for Whip Inflation Now, and they even made up little lapel pins that said WIN, and you could attach it to your shirt. And it was, to get the country united behind whipping inflation. But it was during Jimmy Carter's presidency that we had, are you ready for this? We think we have high interest rates now. We had 21% interest rates. And that was the weapon to whip inflation. Now, I think that Jimmy Carter could have done a far better job of whipping inflation, just like I think Biden could have done a far better job of whipping inflation, just like I hope that Donald Trump will utilize the better tools to whip inflation than interest rates. And it's so simple. It requires no thought. You just reduce government spending. And Musk and Ramaswamy say that they're going to reduce the federal budget by $2 trillion. Bam, done, over and done with. Inflation is cured. And so is the runaway federal budget and the out of control federal bureaucracy. I cannot wait to see it unfold. So Jimmy Carter had choices. He didn't have to resort to let the Federal Reserve do the heavy lifting. He could have curtailed the federal budget, but he chose not to. And then the Iranians took 52 Americans hostage and overtook the American embassy. They held those people hostage for over 400 days. Carter tried to rescue the hostages. He authorized a military action and to unleash the special forces to go and retake the embassy. Now, what made Carter a smart guy in a lot of ways was he was into the details. What made him a failure in rescuing the hostages was that he tried to oversee the mission from the White House. Now, Reagan would never have done that. He would have delegated the job to the generals and said, show me your plan. How are you going to get the hostages out? And then he would have said, report back to me when the mission is complete. Carter tried to oversee it from the White House. The helicopters with the special forces crashed in the Sahara Desert. It cost the lives of, I believe, 7 or 8 of our special forces, young men who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country, who died, and the mission was never carried out then. It was a low point in America, and it really cost Jimmy Carter the presidency. And people blamed the hostage crisis on Carter. I was more lenient in my criticism. I don't think that Carter was to blame so much, but I guess if you really want to be matter of fact about it, if I want to be honest about it with myself and our listeners, you'd have to say that Carter, like Biden, was perceived to be weak, and so the Iranians had no hesitancy to go capture our embassy. If Reagan had been president, if Trump had been president, no way. They would have known that they would have unleashed unholy hell on themselves for doing that. Just like Trump is promising, if they don't release the hostages by the time he takes the oath in the Middle East right now. He is going to unleash the United States, and it has said that all hell is going to break loose if they don't release those hostages. So they've got 8 days to do it. We'll see how it unplays, but I'm talking myself out of being lenient on Jimmy Carter now as I reflect on it. But yeah, he inherited some problems. He got some bad breaks, but shame on him for not being more decisive in the way that he handled them. Now, Rosalind Carter, on the other hand, I likewise had the pleasure and privilege of getting to know. I actually knew her better than I knew the president. Ms. Carter and I shared an interest in mental health. I was a volunteer at Skyline Trail in Atlanta, which is probably the foremost treatment facility in the country for the treatment of mental health mood disorders, which encompass depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, and Skyline Trail was founded in the mid-'80s, and I was asked to go on the advisory board there in, I believe, 1989, and I had 25 years of volunteerism. Served on the board. I was chairman of the board in the last 3 years that I was served, and it was a great pleasure for me. It was very gratifying to be a part of an organization that helped tens of thousands of people through their mental illness. And Mrs. Carter shared that interest, and she had an association with Skyline Trail. And I remember one day very fondly that I and the president of our organization, Beth Finnerty, who I consider to be one of the foremost experts and foremost CEOs of any philanthropic organization in the city of Atlanta, maybe in the Southeast. Beth was there from the beginning with Skyline Trail. We used to have our board meetings around a kitchen table in the basement of a little apartment building that we started out in. Now there are 2 campuses on the Beaufort Highway and North Druid Hills Road, one for adults who suffer from depression and mental illness, another, our young adult campus, which actually came to fruition while I was chairman of the board. And then after I left, the organization started the Rex Fuqua campus for eating disorders, which is largely targeted and to help young women who suffer from eating disorders. So anyway, I digressed. I got off the track here, but Ms. Carter invited us over to the Carter Center. We had a long lunch and tour of the Carter Center with her. She was a lovely lady and humble, genuine, smart, caring. I just don't have enough good things to say about her. And so while Jimmy Carter may not have been a great president, he was a great humanitarian. So was Ms. Carter. They shared that interest together. They did worlds of good all over the world, especially in the African jungles where little children were affected by the guinea worm. And the Carter Center largely, almost single-handedly, eliminated the guinea worm. Well, the guinea worm caused blindness in children. And so they cured that. They eradicated the guinea worm and prevented blindness in young children by doing so. And no telling how many Habitat for Humanity houses were built because of his influence and his leadership. He just was a wonderful, fine human being and left his mark on this world and left the world a better place than he found it particularly in those respects. So our heartfelt condolences go out to the entire Carter family. And it was just a wonderful celebration of life that they had in Washington, D.C. on Thursday of this week. And we got to see President Carter eulogized. And subsequently laid to rest in Plains. The last thing I want to say about him, one of the things that I think speaks volumes about Jimmy Carter, the man, is that when he left the trappings of power in Washington, he did come back to Atlanta where he formed the Carter Center, but they spent their time largely in Plains. And even up until just 2 years ago, every other Sunday, Jimmy Carter taught Sunday school at that Baptist church in Plains. And people would line up around the block to come and hear him. And I always admired the fact that he withdrew from the limelight as after returning to Georgia, having been president, did not seek the limelight, but really worked as a humanitarian and spreading the gospel of Jesus and the teachings of the Bible. So our favorite judge, Mershon, is back in the news this week, sentencing Donald Trump, conducting a sentencing hearing. He basically released him unconditionally with no punishment. But he had to have the hearing. And so it's now my pleasure to welcome on The Truth our guest today, Leslie Corbly, who is a lawyer and has watched these proceedings. Leslie, welcome to The Truth.
Thanks so much for having me.
What do you make of the judge's ruling today, and were you surprised by it at all?
Not particularly surprised. There was a ruling from the Supreme Court that sentencing could go on. Trump had tried to halt sentencing altogether. That clearly did not happen. But I think it was pretty predictable that there wouldn't be any actual penalties put into place. So this unconditional discharges, it was more or less, I think, anticipated that the sentencing would go more or less as it did today.
I don't know about you, but I was really disappointed that the Supreme Court did not delay the sentencing, at least until after President Trump could take the oath in just 9 more days. And Justice Comey Barrett was one of the people that voted with the majority. Chief Justice Roberts voted with the majority. It was a 5-4 decision. No surprise in the case of the Chief Justice for me, at least. But Justice Comey Barrett, I was surprised and disappointed. Your thoughts?
Well, she does seem to be kind of striking her balance on the court or finding her voice in a somewhat centrist manner. So she's voted fairly often with the liberals on the court. So I don't know. I wasn't super surprised. And, the Supreme Court, appellate courts generally can't stand appeals that are considered interlocutory. So when they're before a case is finished, they prefer appeals to occur when the case is completely concluded, which would include sentencing. So I don't think it was that shocking what the court did, although obviously there were 4 Supreme Court justices that would have, that dissented and would have voted the other way.
Well, I'm not sure that the Supreme Court is completely done with this case yet. I've been watching experts all day long reflecting on Mershon's decision, and the conventional wisdom is obviously Trump's going to appeal the verdict to begin with, and most pundits believe that it will be overturned long before it ever gets back to the Supreme Court. But if by some quirk of fate they do not reverse the jury's verdict and the decision, there's a lot of reversible error, is what I'm reading. But in the very unlikely event that it is not reversed, the Supreme Court could get an appeal of Mershon's ruling and the judge's decision, right?
Absolutely. And you're right that the case is by no means over. I would absolutely anticipate President Trump appealing. The case was, had a pretty weak legal theory, and there were lots of, it was a very controversial case. There were lots of people who, disputed legal theory from various sides of the aisle. So I think it really is a case, in my opinion, that highlights what the American public likely views as lawfare. So if you were to take a case that symbolized lawfare, this one would pretty much fit the bill. So I agree with you that it's by no means over, and we'll just have to see where the appeals go. I agree it may not reach the Supreme Court at the appeal level moving forward, but if it does, I guess this court will possibly be looking at the case again.
Well, it just makes me crazy that Mershon would have scheduled the sentencing right before Trump takes the oath of office or proximate to it. But I think it reinforces his lack of good judgment, his lack of temperance, his bias. I mean, here you got a judge that has donated to Joe Biden and whose daughter is profiting based off of social media that she is being paid to post relative to this trial. It marks, I think, a low day in our nation's history and further erodes what little confidence people in the public may have left in our judiciary system, at least in the once great state of New York, but perhaps no longer.
Sure, and I think that there are certain states on the coast, frankly, the West Coast and the East Coast, so that would be New York and California, that are starting to lose their appeal. I mean, these were once states where people would want to move there, and to live and work in New York or California was considered prestigious in a way and something you would kind of, desire to do. And I think that that's not really the case anymore. Increasingly, I think people are viewing both of those states as a place to exit rather than enter.
So, Leslie, what was your take on the uh, case and controversy in uh, this case? I mean, how did you sum up the prosecution's case from the beginning?
I think from the beginning it was pretty weak. I would agree with those experts, and again, there are people who have analyzed this on both sides, but I would agree with those who say it's a pretty weak theory of the case. It was fairly novel. It was no surprise that it was quite a controversial move from the beginning, and it's again, in my opinion, it exemplifies the issues of lawfare in our country right now. There were similar, I think, for example, similar charges that were not brought against Jonathan Edwards years ago, who was embroiled in a scandal involving an affair. So it's just, yeah, I think it was fairly weak on the merits and shouldn't be any surprise that it's going to be appealed. And of course, President Trump was in a very tough venue for him. He was in New York, and that's not exactly a venue that's going to be favorable to his interests.
Where 85% of the voters voted for Joe Biden. I don't know what the breakdown uh, was on the jury pool, but I got to believe that the way they stacked the deck, I mean, you got a biased judge, a biased prosecutor, and 85% of the people in New York, I'm guessing that the jury pool was probably closer to 90 or 95% of Biden voters. And it just makes me ill, frankly. And I relate the whole, you're so nice, Leslie. I bet you don't have any enemies at all. And I'm just sort of like, I'm 72 years old. I ain't sugarcoating it anymore. I think this was, if we weren't on the radio and governed by the FCC rules, I'd tell you what, I think I can say, I thought the case was BS from the very beginning. And I think it's even worse than that now because the American people have spoken in large numbers that said they think the case is BS. They think the lawfare is BS. They think the way that Trump has been treated, the mugshots, the fake prosecutions, and this New York case are, you know, if it was a Netflix series, it would be comical. But because it's the future of our republic and it gets to the heart of our country and what it stands for, it's damnable. And that's how I see it. And I the pendulum has obviously swung, starting with November the 5th when Donald Trump really didn't surprise anybody except by the margin of the victory. It was a landslide. I actually thought it was going to be a nail biter, and it would be a nail biter because the Democrats would cheat at least enough to make it a nail biter, but they couldn't even cheat to enough to make it close. And Trump has steadfastly said, too big to rig. And I thought to myself, and I didn't think to myself, I thought to our listeners, how naive can you be? I mean, we just don't have too big to rig in this country. I wish we did. But man, when it was all said and done, people came out of the woodwork to vote for Trump, including people in the great state of Pennsylvania who came in droves. And his prophecy came true. It was too big to rig. And you would have thought, I would have thought if I was Judge Merchan, okay, if I'm Alvin Bragg, I just got my butt kicked. I'm going to take my toys and go home. These idiots have doubled down on it. What's the matter with them?
Well, I think that I think some people maybe truly believe in this case in a way. And it makes sense. You double down on what you think to be true and accurate. And so, I think in New York, the Overton window is in a very different place than it is in the rest of the country. I would say that just as a base level assessment. You're on these coastal regions or places that are highly left wing. You're not looking at or interpreting facts the same way perhaps as in other spheres of culture and society. And I think for what it's worth, I think that problem is going to continue in the following years. I don't think we're going to be necessarily anywhere closest to broad-based consensus between the two parties for quite a long time in the US. And that's going to pose a lot of problems. But no, I wasn't shocked that they doubled down. I think there's a lot of people out there who truly believe, Trump is a terrible felon. He's engaged in a lot of felonious activity, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of different narratives right now about not just who Trump is and what he stands for, but pretty much all of reality is being interpreted wildly differently based on political viewpoints.
Well, so I guess there are a lot of people out there that want to criminally indict him for having had an alleged affair, which he denies, which
Yes.
Stormy Daniels denied. She's changed her story now, and which Michael Cohen denied, and is on the record. He is tape recorded. I think it's back in 2012 or 2013 when I don't think there's any question that they paid Stormy Daniel money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they deny that they paid her money. Alvin Bragg alleges that it is a criminal violation, a felony, not because they paid her the money and mischaracterized it as a legal expense, but because it related to an underlying felony, which they've never identified. I mean, I'm
Yes.
sorry. The whole thing makes me crazy. I think it is absolute an atrocity, a miscarriage of justice. And the problem that I have with it in the micro is that it's manifestly unfair to Donald Trump because they denied him his due process. In the macro, it sets a new standard for prosecutorial misconduct and exactly what a vicious prosecutor can get away with. And it is translating to every uh, misguided prosecutor in America who wants to go after an enemy. And it sets the bar as to what they can possibly get away with if they choose to go after their enemy. So it just unleashes all sorts of potential prosecutorial misconduct. I call it trickle down ethics. That's what we're witnessing right before us. Some appellate court has got to put a line in the sand. And I think that Judge Merchan and Alvin Bragg have got to be disciplined in order for this not to be repeated by some other future bad prosecutor. That's my paradigm.
It certainly could be repeated, but I think one thing that's a note of optimism from all of this is that the tactic essentially failed. So there is a lot of power in the public pushing back. And I do think very few people outside of those who are quite committed to leftist causes really bought the arguments being made by all this lawfare, right? All this, we're going to throw a lot of charges at Trump and prosecute him. I don't think that that really resonated with the public at large. I think most people saw it for what it was, and I think a lot of people saw those things as political prosecutions, which is it's a good thing, right? So I think that there was a lot of pushback in the public, which is good. And you're right that this case is ongoing. I don't think any indication that President Trump won't appeal. So he'll certainly appeal the verdict, and we'll see where things go from there. But I think that there's, at least for now, in light of the appeals not having been moved forward yet, and we don't really know what that will exactly look like. I think there is the good news is the public pushed back, and I don't think that those tactics that were used were particularly effective to the Democratic cause.
Well, you could actually make a very strong argument that not only were they not effective, they had an adverse unintended effect of
Yes.
bolstering Donald Trump's popularity. And I think that there was a visceral reaction to the manifest unfairness that anybody could see in these vicious prosecutions. And it really propelled Trump, I think, in the long run and moved him closer to the White House rather than further away from it. Leslie
Yes.
Corbly, thank you so much for coming on short notice. Just 8 days, almost to the minute of the beginning of our broadcast today, of the Biden reign of terror coming to an end. It cannot get here fast enough for me. I just hope and pray and encourage every single listener to pray that Donald Trump will be safely installed in the White House. It's still a major concern of mine because I think that this federal government, as I've said here many times, is rotten to its core. They've done everything they could do to stop Donald Trump. I don't think they're finished with their evil yet. So I pray for his health and safety. I pray that 8 days from today, when this broadcast is airing, that he will be safe and securely installed in the White House. And then, oh boy, let's let the good times roll, because I think we've got a lot of very exciting times ahead of us. I also think that we've got a lot of heavy lifting ahead of us. And Leslie, we hope you'll come back and help give us your insights as we watch the 47th presidency of the United States begin to launch.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'd love to be back.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much. As all of our listeners, I'm sure, know, Southern California has been hit by raging wildfires that have literally burned down sections of LA County. Now, there's some 12 million people in Southern California. I think about 5 million in LA County proper. We asked 4,999,000 to come on with us today. They all turned us down. We finally were able to find one person that could give us eyewitness accounts of what is going on in LA and about the fires. Please welcome to the truth someone by my same name, John Gordon, except he puts Junior after his name. John, welcome to the truth.
The junior was given to me. That was not a choice I made.
Okay, well, we're going to save that conversation for a little later. But
Okay.
John, as you know, your mom and I have been really concerned about your safety and our family safety that are in LA. But our heart really goes out to the scores of people. I mean, it's just unbelievable the numbers of people who have lost their homes and lost their automobiles. Not to mention, especially, should have prefaced it with having lost loved ones by these raging fires. What is it like to live right in the epicenter of this tragic, of epic proportion that words really can't describe?
Yeah, well, it's hard. We know several families that have lost their homes. Darcy's my wife Darcy's aunt lost her house in the Palisades, and just their whole block is decimated. And she was in Long Beach when she got the word of what was going on, so she wasn't able to get there and get, people always say, what's your, what's in your go bag? What's the thing that you would grab if you could only, if you had 10 minutes to go into your house and grab your most precious possessions, what would it be? Well, she didn't even have that.
Oh.
And so everything is lost there. And then she's in the Palisades, and then the folks in Pasadena and Altadena are dealing with the same thing. So it's hard, and the ripple effects are really hard to calculate too. We have a guy who helps us with our landscaping in our yard. Comes on Thursdays, and I was talking to him. He says 42 homes that he services in Pasadena are burned to the ground. And that's his livelihood. He said that's his Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And now that money's out of his pocket.
And we have a good friend whose son lives in Pasadena. You met him when you were here over Christmas. And I checked in with his dad yesterday, in fact, and he said they were packing to get out. And just as they were about to walk out of their house, the winds changed and the evacuation warning was lifted. So, I mean, these are just unprecedented events. And what is your sense of well-being living? How far do you live from the edge of the advancing edge of the fire?
I think the closest one to us is the Pasadena fire, and we're about 15 miles from that, 12 to 15 miles from that. But the thing that's most concerning to me is the air quality. 2 days ago, I checked the Apple air quality app, and it was around like 380. And I had to look this up because I didn't really know what it meant, but they say if you Google it, 301 and higher, the definition is hazardous air quality with a health emergency. So thankfully today we're back around 80, which is still very severe, but not emergency conditions. So just you wonder how bad it is to breathe this stuff in. I have a 14-month-old daughter, and I worry about her going outside and breathing this in.
Can you check the air quality inside your house with the Apple app?
I don't think so. I think it's basically like, for us, we live in Jefferson Park, which is a neighborhood in Los Angeles. So it tells us what the air quality is there. I'm sure there are tools you could use to check the air quality in your home. We have several air purifiers going, so hopefully we're okay.
Well, obviously, we are concerned for your well-being and your safety. I know you're being cautious, and you'll use the good brain that you inherited from your father. But so what is the outlook for this weekend? What are you hearing? I know the winds have died down yesterday and today. So what I've read is that they've contained all of the fires, but there are embers that are still being tossed about. But I guess the scary part is that tonight the winds are supposed to pick back up, right?
Yeah, well, so I mean, if you're hearing that they contain the fires, that's news to me. This morning, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm not sure which one of them was at 3% containment and the other was at 8% containment. I can't remember whether the Eaton fire was at 8 or 3% or the Palisades was at 8 or 3%. But I guess containment is what firefighters try to cordon off the fire so it can't spread, and they measure containment by how much of it they've blocked off. Yeah, as long as the winds stay down, then containment should be possible. But if they kick back up, I mean, we were having like 70, 80-mile gusts on Tuesday night. We lost our power. The internet cable went out. So it was pretty severe. The thing that I wonder about is what started these fires, because the wind spreads the fires, but it doesn't start them. So how did all these fires crop up, simultaneously?
Has there been any indication or any reports?
Not that I've seen. I mean, they've addressed it and they've said that they're investigating, but they don't have, they don't have an answer to those questions yet.
And I guess another one of the big concerns is that there are demonic people who have tried to go to those neighborhoods to loot.
Yeah.
What are the local reports saying about that?
Well, so, thankfully, we had a DA, George Gascoigne, who was really sort of soft on crime. And I think that caused him to lose his election to a guy named Nathan Hawkinson, who is a much tougher law and order DA. And, he's throwing the book at these people. As of yesterday, they'd arrested 25 looters. And now that they've brought in the National Guard for containment, the you know local law enforcement agencies are now able to catch more of the looters. So they're charging them with trespassing, looting, everything they can. These people are preying on those who have lost everything, those who have had to abandon their home, their possessions, and it seems like it's not going to be tolerated by the community, which is a good thing.
Well, I always look forward to the day that I would have you on The Truth. This was not the subject matter that I would have expected or hoped that we would be talking
Well, you'll
about.
just have to invite me back.
Absolutely. Well, that was what I was working my way towards. I actually have been waiting for one of the LA teams to achieve a position in the Super Bowl or the World Series or some sporting event that maybe you could bring us up to speed on. But I guess we'll
Well,
have
now
to.
the Dodgers won the World Series last year, Dad.
Well, I
So
know, but there was.
where was my invitation?
You make an excellent point.
Wow.
Thank you for
Happy to be
coming.
here.
Thank you for coming on with us today, John. Stay safe. My best to Darcy and Gable, and have a great weekend and a safe one. We
Thanks for having
continue
me,
to
Dad.
pray
Love you
for
all.
the people in Los Angeles. It's a pleasure to welcome back to The Truth Michael Letts. He is the founder of InvestUSA.org. They provide armored vest or bulletproof vests to police officers across the country who otherwise would not have that protection. Michael, welcome back and Happy New Year.
Well, happy New Year to you, John. It's always a privilege to be with you. We thank you for the opportunity.
I tell you, I was full of excitement for 2025, and I still am, but we've certainly gotten off to a rough start with two what appear to be terrorist attacks, one in New Orleans and one in Las Vegas. Tell us what you know about these.
Well, John, unfortunately, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. Quite frankly, we have 17 days until the inauguration. And contrary to what the current administration had said about a peaceful transition, I think we're far from it. I think everything is being done at this stage to disrupt the transfer of power, to, if all possible, declare a national emergency, postpone the inauguration. And so I think you're just beginning to see the tip of the iceberg, and it's a coordinated movement. Let's talk about each one individually. Well, let's first of all talk about New Orleans. There are so many issues that raise a red flag, John, on that particular attack, terrorist attack. You'll notice, first of all, the barricades in key locations were not set up. Now that we've given vests to the New Orleans PD, know the chief, know the officers very well. That's not something that typically happens. Second of all, you'll notice right after it occurred, within less than 10 minutes, the FBI was on site to take over the investigation and to make it a federal investigation and to kind of keep a lid on what the narrative was going to be. John, I've been involved in law enforcement for a long time. I have never seen the feds or the FBI on a scene within 10 minutes, unless, quite frankly, they had known ahead of time that there was going to be an issue there. Then let's begin to analyze what happened. You've got a person who has an ISIS flag, okay, and quite frankly, prior military, who should have been on the radar screen. In fact, I won't be surprised if the FBI comes out later and says, we were studying him or we were aware of him. The problem, John, is they do this on everything. Every situation that occurs, they've had them on their radar screen, but they never did anything about it. In this particular instance, you had IED material and IED plants in the truck, supposedly video of him planting some around, but none of them were viable. He's prior military. He knows what he's doing, John. He's not going to plant a plastic rubber hose and say it's a bomb For what purpose? No, I don't buy any of that. Then he had a automatic weapon that he had, assault rifle with him that he shot two of the officers with when he had dealt with his mayhem. And so you can begin to see that there is, then of course the FBI immediately comes out and says it was not terrorist related. Now they're having to backpedal. But because of that, it becomes a very questionable situation, to say the least, John.
Well, I feel where you're coming from. I mean, the things that I've read that are similarities is that both perpetrators, Samshud Din Jabbar, I don't know how you pronounce the first name, Samshud Din Jabbar.
We're going to call him Jabbar.
Huh?
We'll just call him Jabbar. I think
Jabbar, yeah, that's good enough. And then Matthew Liversberger. We'll just call him Matthew. Matthew and Jabbar both served in the Army. That probably narrows the list of suspects down to a few 100,000, maybe over 1 million. But they both trained at Fort Bragg.
Correct.
Drawing a little tighter circle. They both served at the same time in Afghanistan. We draw a little tighter circle. They both rented the electric trucks. Both of them used electric trucks, and they both rented them from a pretty discreet rental company.
Correct.
And of course, they both carried out their terrorist attacks almost, not exactly, but in close proximity to one another, almost simultaneously. So it does seem to be getting a little too familiar to me. And then in the case of Jabbar, he supposedly, I read one news account, knows or knew Ryan Routh,
Correct.
who's the assassin from West Palm, would-be assassin in West Palm Beach. So I'm with you. It just stinks to high heaven. It smells. We don't have tangible proof that they were coordinated and it was a conspiracy. But it seems to me there's more evidence favoring that conclusion than disfavoring it. What do you think?
Well, I think you're exactly right, John. And let's talk about a little further with Jabbar. All these particular issues, the lack of the barricades, the fact that, they suddenly, the FBI showed up. It's interesting. The FBI truly believed, John. I mean, like I said, I've been in law enforcement, worked with the FBI quite a few different occasions. They really thought they were explosives. They would have shut that place down so fast, John, you wouldn't have been able to speak on the air. They would have done an immediate evacuation. You notice that didn't happen. In fact, what they said is, we're not so sure they're viable. How would they know unless they'd really experienced and taken a look at them? They can't have done that quickly. Now let's move quickly over to.
I don't think you would have taken a chance.
No, they wouldn't have.
They may not be viable. Well, you hold it. I'm not going to hold it then.
You see, you look at that. You look at the FBI immediately wanting to come in to control the narrative. That's why they were there within minutes. They want to take control. They want to tell you what you should or should not think. Now let's quickly move over to Las Vegas. And Matt, who's with the 10th, I happen to be very familiar with the 10th Special Forces, Green Berets. And Matt was a operative staff sergeant who knows explosives extremely well. Now, why is that important? First of all, let's take a look at the case itself. Here's what they are, the narrative they're having you to believe. They're having you to believe that the truck came up, stopped. Matt had already been shot in the head. Now, what's significant about Matt being shot in the head? This is with a 50 caliber desert Glock, okay? 50 caliber will basically take your head off. There's not much left of it. So why is that important? It destroys the forensic ability for dental records. You get hit with a 50 cal. So that's important. I want you to keep that in mind. Second of all, suddenly you have an explosion go off that amounts to nothing more than a little bit of firecrackers, basically, is what it is. But it somehow consumes the body beyond recognition. There wasn't enough heat put off after that explosion to do that to the body, quite frankly. You're insulting special forces by saying that the most knowledge that they have is to be able to pull off a firecracker scenario. If he really was going in to create a terrorist attack, terrorist method, he would have been successful. He would have made sure that the explosive and incendiary devices would have taken out basically the first floor and everybody in it. So the question becomes, is it really Matt that did this, or is this a setup? Is this a interwoven situation? We know, John, that we have terrorists, Al Qaeda, ISIS in this country now. We know that we have cells all across the country. We know they're not independent of each other, they coordinate with each other. We know, quite frankly, that yes, there could be some concern and some question from a military standpoint that we have them trying to penetrate some cells within the military. And quite frankly, that occurred over in Afghanistan and occurred in this particular area with Fort Bragg. That needs to be rooted out to make sure. But what is their purpose in doing this? Well, John, you remember what are they trying to accomplish between now and January the 20th? They don't want a change in power. They don't want a peaceful transition. And so they're trying to create as much fear as possible to the American people. They want to create as many incidences that have occurred. They want you to think that, oh my goodness, the military is now turning on us, and the military are trying to kill its own citizens. That's the farthest thing from the truth. We may have some bad apples in there, but quite frankly, this is more of an organized effort by a larger group, larger cells, ISIS and Al Qaeda. But you remember this administration, talking about the Biden administration, took 4 years to make sure they had plenty of them were able to get in, unaccounted for. They've done nothing to impede that. They have weaponized and politicized the FBI system. That's why when the FBI came in and said, "Oh, no terrorist connections here," they had to backtrack those. That's why you heard Senator Kennedy, when he was part of that press conference down in New Orleans, express his frustration. Quit lying to the American people. Tell us the truth. Tell us what's going on, and let's fix it. Why can't they do that? They don't want you to know the truth, John. They don't want you to know that they're impeding, trying to create a new administration, that they're trying to stay in power. And that is their whole goal and objective. Final thing on this, John, the sad part about this is, quite frankly, they have penetrated so well that I think you're seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to terrorist activity. I think over the next 17 days, you're going to see a whole lot more. And quite frankly, it's time that we as the American people demand better. You know, Trump, when he gets in, will make sure that we begin to drain this swamp. We begin to put people in place that will take strong action. And the sooner that gets here, the better off we're all going to be, John.
Well, I think he needs to put some people in orange jumpsuits, if not in the guillotine, because what some of these people have done is, in my view, is absolutely treasonous, and we cannot allow them to get away with it. But do you really sit here and think that within 17 days that things could get so off the rails that the inauguration could be postponed? Are you suggesting that that's going to happen, or is it a fear or
Well,
a
I will tell
possibility? Where
you
do you put it?
what the intel sources are showing. A lot of intel communication, a lot of what we call chatter, of more activity to come. Here's what their objective, well, I say their objective, talking about the leftist ideology's objective to be, is to keep the inauguration from happening, period. Well, that's not going to happen. So what's the next thing we're going to do? Let's try to postpone it, delay it. Let's create a national emergency crisis in this country that we're under attack from terrorists so we can postpone it. And if we can't postpone it, then let's create such havoc in the country that the new administration can't do anything to help the American people. They've got too many brush fires they're trying to put out. They're doing a very good job at that one, quite frankly, John. And yes, I expect more to occur. And quite frankly, what I have suggested is I don't think the American people could really care whether we have an inauguration or not, as long as we have a swearing in.
That's right.
Quite frankly, I think we ought to do it immediately instead of waiting for 17 days, because we don't have anybody at the helm now. We all know it. Joe has checked out and it's being run by the same people that ran it for the last 4 years. The sooner we get them out of power and out of the way, the better off we're all going to be as American citizens.
Well, and these people have proven to be so inept over the last 4 years that most of the things that they tried to do, all the things they tried to do to get Trump, backfired on them. Every time there was a new mugshot, his popularity soared. Every time when the attempted assassination occurred, his popularity soared. It probably was the single most pivotal event that allowed Trump to win Pennsylvania, which put him over the top. And so I would think that if there was some sort of a national emergency, my natural reaction would be what you just said. Let's get Trump, have him take the oath of office now, not wait until January the 20th. Clean house and get the what few documents have not been shredded yet, because I'm sure they're lazy enough that they didn't work over the holidays. They're going to have to get back to work on Monday, shredding the documents that are left and cleansing their hard drives.
What's interesting, John, is, and they know it, but they don't want to admit it, is we've been able to track and get those documents and those hard drives, copies of them. So they may be spending their time thinking that they're destroying evidence, but we've got it. We know where it's at. And quite frankly, it's going to come back to haunt them. But let me add something else, John, that we're talking about in this whole vein of what's going on in the next 17 days. You know, this morning, unfortunately, we have been notified that violent gang out of Venezuela is mounted a force, many of its members on the border, and they are crossing into the United States and attacking our border agents with knives, with metal rods, with weapons. And quite frankly, they're doing it to try to get in and make the best of this current administration's policy on open immigration, open borders. And here's where we need to stand. This is where I've been telling you on the national news. It's time that we as Americans say we support showing the world what America used to be. We need to send our troops down there immediately, and we need to stop this activity. And quite frankly, we need to send them back across the border in body bags. We need to tell Mexico, you either use your military to fix this situation, or we'll be happy to come across the river and do it ourselves. And we'll go as far into Mexico as necessary. If it means going all the way to Mexico City, we're going to clean out these cartels. We will not allow a neighboring country to harbor terrorists coming in and trying to destroy and harm the American people. And we'll do that, period, anywhere. We start sending that message, especially on that and on these terrorist attacks. It's time that people in this country have the ability to be firm in their commitment that they're safe, and to have a little bit of honor and respect once again, and for the world to fear the American might. And that's where we're coming from, and it's coming very quickly.
So is there any talk or thought of Governor Abbott deploying the National Guard to protect the ICE officials at the border? Because you know Joe Biden's not going to do it.
You're exactly right. Joe Biden isn't going to do anything. But yes, there is discussion with that now. In fact, it's also a discussion within the upcoming administration how that we're going to need to not just be able to deal with the criminal element that's here in this country, the illegal cartels, human sex traffickers, terrorists, etc. But we're going to have to, Mexico is going to have to clearly understand there is a different league in town now. We will not allow a country to harbor terrorists, to harbor cartel members, to harbor those who would seek to hurt and destroy the American people, and them not do anything about it. That is a position they have taken. And of course, I know why. Remember, I lived in Mexico my entire life, John. I know that government like the back of my hand. And quite frankly, it's just corrupt to the core. Their military is paid off. Everyone's paid off. So if they cannot handle the situation on their own because they're corrupt, then it's time that we go in. It's time, John, that we show the pride in this country that we've had years ago, where we are a might, we are a force. You will not harm the American citizens and not pay for it.
Sounds like you're in effect saying that there is a new sheriff in town, and by
And
gosh,
that's
it's
exactly the
about
word.
damn time.
And hell's a coming, John. You know, I mean, they will not be able to stop it. And it gets back to this whole issue when we started this show. They want to do everything they can to instill fear into the American people, to make you think their narrative. Hey, they're getting a little too pushy, a little too rough, a little too mighty. They need to back off. We need to be compassionate. We need to kind of work with people. Absolutely not. That is not the message that we're going to send anymore. You harm the hair of an American citizen, and you will pay for it. And quite frankly, putting you in a body bag is not off the table.
So Mike Johnson got elected Speaker of the House on Friday. That gives us a solid majority in the House, the Senate, and the White House. How's the change going to come? How do we know it when we see it? What are you predicting?
Well, we have been in some of those meetings down in Mar-a-Lago, and quite frankly, the minute that swearing in is over, The executive orders are already prepared. They're ready for signature. And you will begin to see, first of all, when it comes to illegal immigrants, Tom Herman has got his people together. We've agreed to help make sure they are properly equipped with bulletproof vests and necessary things they need to be able to be safe. And we're going to go in and begin to take on, we know where they're at. This government under Biden has lied repeatedly. They lie about everything. They would rather lie, John, than tell you the truth.
That's their
So
go-to. I agree.
their intel community is it all. They're here. We have no idea where they're at. That's not true. We know exactly where they're at. We are prepared teams. We are ready to move. You're going to see them move very quickly, along with military support. And this is what I want to prepare the country for, because this is what you're going to be hearing from the other side. Oh my goodness, look what you voted for. It's a military coup. It's a dictatorship coming. That is absolutely not true. What is coming is the terrorists, the drug cartelists, the human sex traffickers, the villains are better armed and better protected than most of our law enforcement officers are. We need to send the message of tactical strength and tactical power. So we need our special forces to be with our law enforcement. We're going to go in. I can promise you, they're not going to be sitting on the curb with the little lunch pails talking about these terrorists and cartel members waiting to be able to catch a bus ride back out of the country. They're going to put up resistance. We expect that. We want to show them that we are prepared to defend our citizens and our country and put them in. They have an option, get out, or we're going to put them out in body bags. You start sending that message, and John, you'll get some reaction real quickly. You're going to see cleanup. You're going to see a lot of things, positive things happening. But don't buy the rhetoric of the mainstream America that America has gone nuts and it's being a sadistic and it's somehow trying to destroy or harm its citizens or poor innocent people. That is simply not going to be the case.
No, the only entity that has gone nuts is our federal government, accompanied by the mainstream media. When that truck exploded in Las Vegas, one of the media outlets, I think it was Reuters, reported that Tesla truck explodes, 1 killed, 3 injured. They didn't bother to say that the one that was killed was the perpetrator and he committed suicide. I mean, this media is as false and fictitious as they can get. And I urge our listeners every single week just to unplug it, just to cancel your subscriptions to the New York Times, the LA Times, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Stop watching ABC. Find your news on YouTube. Come and listen to The Truth with John Gordon every Saturday from 12 to 2 on the John Fredericks Media Network, on CD Media Press, on 13 digital platforms around the globe, and on our live stream at YouTube, Getter, Rumble, and on X. So I hope that people will continue to turn to the mainstream, away from the mainstream media, to people who really do care about our country and really do care about publicizing truthful, factual information and not a narrative that has bias built into it. So what do you think the next 17 days? You're painting a picture that it may not be that it could get pretty dicey. What's the worst case scenario?
What you're going to see is an attempt to continue to instill. Here's their key. They want every American to be fearful within the next 17 days and to be so fearful. You remember they did this with COVID. They got you to believe that the only person that could save you was the government. They want the same thing. They're going to create havoc. They're going to allow havoc to be created by those that have come in illegally so that you begin to fear that the only way that there's going to be a solution to this is the government. Now, you remember that government is the one that's currently in place. They're not talking about the new one coming in. So they want you to be as fearful that if you don't listen to the current government, and what is the current government going to be telling you? Hey, look, you need to be compassionate. We need to be working with these people. This mass deportation doesn't work. These policies don't work. They're going to try to do everything they can to trash the administration coming in. And what they really would like to do is create a national emergency situation to where they postpone a transfer of power, period, indefinitely. And that's what they're looking to do.
Well, if what you're saying or inferring is correct, that this was a deliberate attempt, and are you suggesting that it was conducted by members of our government?
I am suggesting this, and quite frankly, I think it's very easy to verify and to validate. This government, under this administration, did one thing. They made sure that there were enough people coming in including members of Al Qaeda, ISIS, and others. We know that to be documented. We know that there are tens of thousands on the terrorist watch list that have come in, created cells all across this country. John, those cells are not independent of each other. They're all coordinated together, working for one objective. Once that objective is whatever our government does, but they work in partnership. And the partnership that they're working at is keep the new administration either out or create such a havoc and such a mess that they're not very effective when they come in. And yes, quite frankly, I think that's exactly what's going on. Let's talk about just one quick thing that you mentioned, talking about with Matt in Las Vegas. That vehicle is autopiloted. Okay, it came around first at 7:30, then and made its pattern, then came back in at 8:30 when the explosion occurred. And here's what I want you to understand: it was 17 seconds by the time it got in from at 8:30 before the explosion went off. There's no way a person, even special forces, can shoot himself with a 50 cal, blow him half of himself up, and still allow the explosion to take place and to be coordinated. This is how this works. If you're going to go to that effort, you're going to see to it, John, that your mission was accomplished. You're not going to be a part of the explosion. You're going to make sure that it goes off without a hitch. So what I believe happened is either Matt is still alive and it is another person that they're using. Isn't it convenient that the only evidence that they have is a passport and an ID card put in the glove compartment box, which anybody could have done?
So, Michael, I'm not sure. I may have not caught it, but did you say that you were acquainted with Matt? That you knew him?
I'm acquainted with his unit, Special Forces, Special Ops Unit, the 10th out of Germany, and I know how that unit operates. And trust me, they don't make stupid mistakes. They want to take out or make a statement, take out a building. They don't use firecrackers and a couple extra gas cans in the back end of a pickup truck to accomplish the mission.
Well, I don't really. I'm not a gun person. I own guns, but I own guns that you shoot quail, dove, and duck with. But a 50 caliber gun doesn't sound like the kind of gun that somebody would use to kill themselves.
No, I mean it's impossible for him to do what they are characterizing, to pull up at 8:30 and in 17 seconds make sure the explosion went off, and then turn around and use that 50 cal to basically terminate himself. You can't use a 50 cal with one hand steadily pointed in your direction to begin with. It's logistically impossible. It's logistically impossible what they're saying. My question is, I want to know now, where is Matt? Have we been able to track down? He was on leave. Has anybody been able to track him down and see him? Because I obviously don't believe what the federal government is telling me, that he was the person that was involved in this to begin with. I think, quite frankly, it's all a coordinated effort to make sure that they're accomplishing their end means, and their end means is nefarious. They don't want this incoming administration. They want to do everything they can to disrupt it or keep it from happening. And they've got 17 more days to continue to do so.
Absolutely unbelievable. So what I'm hearing you say is that by using the 50 caliber gun, that it obliterated the individual, and that what was left was consumed by fire, which is another way of saying that the body was cremated. Where have I heard that one before? Thomas Matthew Crooks, cremated 10 days after Butler. The similarities are starting to stack up a bit, aren't they?
And you see, John, here's the point. This is a coordinated effort. We don't just have one terrorist in this country. We know we have a network of them. And there appears to be a coordination between the units as to how they want to accomplish what the ultimate narrative is. And the ultimate narrative and objective, first of all, they didn't want to lose the election. Second of all, if they did, which it's already past us now, and there is a new administration coming in, they want to do as much damage to this country as possible, make it as hard as possible for the new administration to accomplish anything, and if possible, keep that new administration from even taking oath in office for as long as they possibly can delay it. And they're using everything they have in their arsenal to do so.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. Our listeners on The Truth know that I predicted, or I suspected, I should say, that there could be a black swan event prior to the 2024 election that would justify them postponing the election so they could stay in power. Maybe I miscalculated it. Maybe they're not as competent as we give them credit for. Maybe they missed their opportunity for the election and now they're trying to do what I said for the better part of the last year, that I feared that they would somehow interfere with Donald Trump taking the White House. And great minds. I mean, I don't want to believe this. I don't want to predict it because I don't want to believe that there are people that are that fundamentally evil that live among us. But I guess it's time for me to grow up and smell the coffee and realize that there really is true evil in this world. And we're seeing it played out right in front of us. And they seem to be in partnership with the current administration, which came into office on a lie, and they're leaving office on a lie. And with whether there will be more or not, I don't know. But they've certainly wreaked enough havoc just in the 4 years that we've had to endure this. I pray that the reign of terror is soon to be over.
I think that's the key, John. And like I said, I'm pushing it on your show. I think the better thing to do is to go on ahead and have a swearing in ceremony now, because we don't have any leadership at the top anyway. Let's go ahead and not wait for 14 or 17 days, and then we can make a very quick announcement. You want to continue with your nefarious activities? There's a new sheriff in town, and we're going to crack down and crack down hard.
Well, I for one would be thrilled with that outcome. I don't know the mechanism by which that could be accomplished, but I'm just hoping that when Trump does get into office and Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, the others come into office with him, that they will conduct serious investigations into all of this stuff. And I do want the people that have done it held accountable. Wherever the evidence leads, to whomever it points to, these people, if what you say is true, and my instincts, and based on the knowledge that I have, which is all in the public domain, but I study this stuff night and day, every day of my life, to me, there were 16 people that died between New Orleans and Las Vegas. Two of them were the perpetrators. One of them may or may not have been Matt. But at the very least, these people are guilty of conspiracy to commit murder against 16 Americans. If your description is accurate, there needs to be a serious atonement and punishment for that.
And that's just the beginning, John.
It's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. And people say, how can you be so fanatical, shall we say, on that? When you allow tens of thousands of known terrorists to come into this country, and we know for a fact there's cells all across the country, what do you think they're here for? You think they came because of the fact that we're going to renounce their terrorist activities and help grow potatoes or something? I mean, really, use some common sense.
And
they're here for a reason.
And military age fit men crossing the border from China, maybe as many as 10,000, while spy balloons are traversing our country. And CCP police stations, 2 in New York, 1 in Houston, 2 in Los Angeles. I mean, it's unprecedented. It boggles the mind that this could happen. And it all leads back to Joe Biden.
You bring a great question up, John. The intel figures we've actually got now is closer to 70,000
Oh my
that are
gosh.
military age. That are in fact, this is an indisputable fact. There are more of them now than we have in our entire Marine Corps division. So quite frankly, there are more military age illegal immigrants here than we have within our military division within the United States Marine Corps.
So are you saying
That's
from
certainly
all
their position.
nationalities or specifically from China?
That's specifically from China. There's another 30,000 on top of the 70 I just mentioned to you that are from either Venezuela, Iran, that are from Libya, and that are from Lebanon and from Afghanistan. Quite frankly, they're all positioned, and they're not over here because they're looking for a better way of life. We know that for a fact. America is under attack. We are at war. Quite frankly, we have to recognize that, and we have to take very strong measures to counter it and to make us free and safe once again. And the American people just have to realize that this is where we're at. This is what this administration, and it's not just this administration. The Obama administration kind of helped pave the way, shall we say, to get this accomplished. But here's where we're at. And quite frankly, we have the ability to counter it. We need to take it, and we need to take it very aggressively. And I think you will see that. But I wanted to warn the American people, when you see aggression being taken to provide for your safety, please understand it's for your best interest. And please don't buy what the mainstream media is going to try to tell you.
Very well said. We'll leave it there. Michael Letts, the founder of Invest USA. You can find him at investusa.org. A fascinating conversation, and one to be continued, I'm sure. Thank you, Michael, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. God bless you. God bless America, John.
The Truth with John Gordon.
I woke up on top of the world this morning.
We break down today's political landscape and feature interviews with key guests.
It doesn't matter if they call you a or a
to uncover the real story behind current events in the United States.
Of course, saw a rifle pointing through a fence with a chain link. Okay, so
you're a good man. I just want to give you a compliment because you have courage to stay with the truth.
I hate injustice.
This is great fun. I like you and your ideas. So let's do some more of this.
We're pleased to have as our guest today Gregory Stenstrom. He is the co-author of a best-selling book called Parallel Election, a blueprint for deception. Should I call you Greg or Gregory?
Gregory Stenstrom. Greg's fine. Greg's
what
fine.
What did I say? Did I mispronounce your last name?
Stenstrom. It's you said Strom. It's Swedish derivative.
Stenstrom. It's the new year, and I haven't quite joined it yet. It's about time. Gregory,
early.
Welcome to The Truth. Is 2025, President Trump just won by a landslide, the most votes of any Republican president ever. Why are we still talking about election fraud now?
Because there was massive election fraud, and President Trump overcame that election fraud. It doesn't mean there wasn't any. The election fraud, in fact, was, I think, more concentrated and more perfected in 2024 than it was in 2020. And what saved President Trump and saved the American public was the numbers. In 2020, we had 60 to 70% turnouts with an average of about 65% of in-person voting. In 2024, that number went to, in Pennsylvania, 83 to 86% showed up in person to vote, broke the curves. But in the mail-in ballots were significantly curtailed. Early voting and mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, they had 700,000 less mail-in ballots in 2024 than they were able to count in 2020. In our county alone, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which is southeast corner of Pennsylvania, just underneath Philadelphia, just in our county alone, we went from 120,000 votes for for Biden to 60,000 for Kamala Harris. We cut the number of mail-in ballots in half just in our county. The margin that it just showed in the assertion of the election that I just read the other day for Pennsylvania was 3.5 million to 3.4 million votes. So there was only a 100,000 difference once we added everything up at the end of the day in Pennsylvania. So these were squeakers. And that had 80% of people not shown up for the election in-person vote, he would not have overcome the cheating in the mail-in ballots. We had machines. We had federal suits filed that the machines had unauthorized code on them. They weren't certified. This was admitted by the Secretary of the Commonwealth. These were admissions that they made in the courts. And nevertheless, Trump overcame it. So there was massive election fraud. Trump just overcame it. But undercard in multiple states for the Congress and the U.S. Senate, some of those candidates weren't so fortunate.
So his thesis of too big to rig actually worked, it sounds like.
In part, too big to rig was based on a premise of early registration and mail-in ballot voting. And had that prevailed, he would have lost. What saved him, it was the in-person voting on the day of the election. The day of the election, with quote unquote 99% of the vote counted, the tally was 65 million for Trump and 61 million for Harris. Think of those numbers, 65 million versus 61 million. And Trump, quote unquote, won in a landslide. As of today, those numbers have changed to 74 million and 73 million. So the numbers have gone up substantially, and somehow 1% of the vote turned into approximately 25 million votes of the total. So there's a lot of explaining to do. We've discussed this. We've filed multiple court cases that will get to the bottom of this. We've requested DOJ investigations. We have a Supreme Court case currently before the U.S. Supreme Court, case 24-430, that demands that the Supreme Court order the Department of Justice to rescind their unlawful policy to not investigate election fraud until after the certification. And then after certification, they don't investigate at all because it's moot. So
Yeah,
essentially,
after the fraud, they say you waited too late to bring the case. So clearly
that's
they
it.
don't want to. Would they have the same policy if the Republicans were accused of cheating?
Absolutely not. They showed that in their prosecutions of the governors in Virginia and I think West Virginia, but in Virginia in particular, they went after Youngkin, and in cases where it was convenient for the DOJ to intervene and obstruct, they had no problem prosecuting and bringing forth cases. In all cases where we demanded investigations of election fraud, and we filed multiple disclosures over the last several years with the House Judiciary, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney General, Special Counsel Jack Smith, Pennsylvania Attorney General, district attorneys. I mean, we filed multiple disclosures demanding investigation, which they are required by federal statute to investigate. Those were obstructed and systemically thwarted because of an internal policy that violates federal law. That's the subject of our SCOTUS lawsuit. It's been thwarted. We filed it October 4th. We filed an emergency motion to expedite October 14th because we wanted to get some resolution before the November election. That was thwarted by the chief clerk of the Supreme Court, Scott S. Harris. Most recently, we filed what's called a Rule 22 and a 23 with Justice Alito and Thomas, which demands and requests that they take unilateral action and at least give us an order or give us some relief before the certification on January 6th. And that was again thwarted. We filed multiple filings. It's going to end up in criminal courts. It's not something that will continue to evade accountability, but we've performed all due diligence to make this a front and center before the Department of Justice, and they have been recalcitrant. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, Christopher Wray, FBI Director Christopher Wray, Inspector General Horowitz, have been absolutely recalcitrant and acted, quite frankly, criminally. And we've made those criminal referrals and charges to the House Judiciary Committee and say these are not discretionary violations. These are criminal, felonious criminal acts committed by appointed officials, political officials in our government.
Well, the vote is the bedrock of our democracy, our republic. And without an honest, free, fair election, we cannot have any form of democracy in this country. I applaud what you're doing. And the fact of the matter is, I have had you on today and invited you because I'm still very upset about what happened in 2020. It has not been resolved. President Trump continued to talk about it all the way up and through the election on November the 5th. Do you think that he's prepared to let it go now, or is election integrity going to be at the top of his list?
Well, it's not at the top of his list, and it probably shouldn't be, because right now the country is suffering some specific ails that need addressing. I think the first is the economy, which he is addressing very rapidly, opening the pipelines again. He's made some very strong moves and opening moves to energize the economy. He has fulfilled his commitment so far in terms of what illegal aliens, what's going to the process to address that problem. But he just this past week, he stated a definitely strong interest or a commitment to pursue 2020 election fraud, 2022 election fraud, 2024 election. And the evidence, some of the evidence that he's referred to when he says he has irrefutable evidence is Leah Hoops and myself, who are authors of The Parallel Election, and who you can find that on parallelelection.com. You can find the video there, The Big Con. You can find the book. You can find other short vignettes. Leah Hoops and myself were co-defendants with President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and several others, Jenna Ellis, Phil Klein, in a defamation suit brought against us in Philadelphia. We have other defamation suits that have been brought against us that have still been unsuccessful, but we successfully defended ourselves in that defamation suit over 952 days. And what we used was what's called a truth as a complete defense. We submitted all of our evidence of massive election fraud to the judge, and the judge found that the lawyer and people who brought the case, James Savage being one, it was a frivolous case, and it was lack of candor and basically the lawyer had committed misconduct in bringing that case and prosecuting that case, and had falsified many of his statements and many of his filings. So we won that case. They withdrew. The judge, the lawyer ended up being suspended, disbarred for 18 months. He will probably not be able to recover his law license. He's closed his office, and similar outcomes in the defamation suit brought against us in Delaware County are probably going to be the same. So we have the evidence. We have video evidence, audio evidence of election officials at very high levels admitting on video of fabricating the election results in 2020. We have video of them destroying, and this is mass destroying. This is just throwing away return sheets, paper tapes, literally shredding and burning evidence of their massive election fraud. So we've got them cold. And if this gets before the DOJ, which quite frankly, I think they're trembling, not only here in Pennsylvania, but in other states, once this comes to more public light, it's going to be a doozy. They're going to, it will be a reckoning.
You mentioned Rudy Giuliani. He had a much different outcome in Georgia, where he was sued for defamation by Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. I think it was actually in federal court, but out of the Georgia election and his advocacy in that state, he ended up getting socked with I think a $50 million judgment against him. They've taken his law license, they've taken his reputation, and now they've even taken family heirlooms as a means of marshaling his assets. They've taken his home. They're trying to take his home in Palm Beach, where he's homesteaded. What do you make of all that, and how does he get justice?
Well, it's a gross injustice for Rudy Giuliani. He probably should have stuck with us, Leah Hoops and myself. We represented ourselves pro se. Rudy Giuliani was only briefly represented, and then he didn't participate. He just didn't have the means, or I think the wherewithal, or just the resources anymore to defend himself. When we were at the point where we had won the case, the attorney approached us in front of the judge and asked to make a deal. And he said he had already secured a $1 million judgment against Giuliani, default judgment. So Rudy Giuliani already had a $1 million judgment against him. So the attorney was looking at $1 million from Giuliani alone. And he asked Leah Hoops and myself, he said, hey, I'm going to let you guys go from the case. And we said, why would we do that? I mean, what, are you going to pay us or something, or what? We're ready to go to trial. We're going to beat your brains in. So the judge somewhat snickered and he said, your client's guilty of everything that he said, and all the election officials that we presented evidence of. We have the evidence of massive fraud. We can't wait to go to a jury, and we're not taking the deal. So let's go to court.
Good for you.
2 days later, they dropped the case, discontinued. The lawyer withdrew, and the judge later filed. Literally, we had a hearing, and the judge sanctioned the attorney.
So in the aftermath of 2020, you took your information to a district attorney who took it straight to Bill Barr, if I understand correctly. And what
U.S.
happened?
attorney. U.S.
I'm
attorney.
sorry?
There's
The U.S.
a
attorney.
U.S. attorney. There's 94 U.S. attorneys in the United States. And U.S. Attorney McSwain is the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District Court of Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So he was worked directly for William Barr. That's who he works for. The 94 U.S. attorneys work directly for the U.S. Attorney General. So Bill McSwain didn't have any middlemen. Of course, there were some middlemen in the emails, but that was direct correspondence, and he was directly ordered by Bill Barr. In fact, in July of 2021, when he wanted to run for governor, and he was running for governor, he filed a mea culpa. You can look it up. And he said to President Trump that he had been told to stand down by William Barr and also to place the investigation in the hands of then Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who's now our governor, and he did not trust Shapiro to move forward with the investigation. As a matter of fact, Josh Shapiro denied having had this case turned over to him by McSwain when the evidence clearly shows that William McSwain did turn everything over to Shapiro as directed by the U.S. Attorney. So there's a lot of lying to do, done. Shapiro, we caught him in a lie. He said he had done a complete investigation of 2020 through right to knows and subpoenas and through court orders. We were able to ascertain that he never did. He lied and that he never performed any investigation. Similarly, the district attorney, which is a county level prosecutor, similarly said he had conducted an investigation, and through private investigators and right to knows, we determined that that was a lie as well. So we have a lying district attorney who falsely stated he investigated. We have a lying attorney general of Pennsylvania, now governor, and a lying U.S. attorney general who all said that they did investigations when no such thing occurred. And the evidence is that they obstructed those investigations and that we do, in fact, have evidence of massive election fraud. So this is the comeuppance. President Trump, of course, is aware of all this. He knows what he has. He couldn't, he had an election campaign to run. He couldn't run his campaign based on, hey, they stole the election in 2020. He had to win it all over again in 2024. It's a lot to absorb. Most people, it's not unreasonable. Most people aren't aware of this, which is purposeful. The media has, mainstream media has completely quashed this. You'd think, winning a defamation case, using truth as a complete defense and proving massive election fraud. Rudy Giuliani, I didn't really finish the thought there, but when you think about it, Rudy Giuliani had already had a $1 million judgment against him, and he's scot-free. Everybody in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia walked.
Well, is there any means of accountability at this point? I mean, the things that you're saying are really shocking, and I do want to talk about the media here in a minute. But for these people to have been able to pull this off, it had to be well coordinated somewhere along the line. I mean, you just don't allow these things to happen by accident. I mean, who is there a puppet master? Is there one person that this all links back to, or a
Yes.
small group? Who is it? Who are they?
It's a subject of an article that I wrote in the Intelligencer.today. You can look it up. It's called The Council, Who's Running the United States of America. And in 1978, there was a legislatively created group literally called The Council. It's a real name. They were originally called the Council. They eventually settled on what they called the CIGI, the Council for Inspectors General for Integrity and Efficiency, the CIGI, C-I-G-I-E. And that is a legislatively created body in 1978 that they call sui generis. They're untouchables. They're answerable to no one. And that includes the Inspector General of the United States, who is Michael Horowitz, the director of the DOJ, which is the U.S. Attorney General, and the director of the FBI, whoever that is at the time. And if you look at the history from 1978 to present, what you're going to find is familial, generational, and very, very tight control over that specific group, the SIGI. They're the ones who swing the bat. They're the ones who are the puppet masters, the corruptors, the coordinators, and they are very much in control. And they can prosecute anybody they want, any business person, any politician. Most people think that it's like President Obama or George Soros or the cabal or the WEF. I hear all kinds of fanciful things, Israel. You hear all these unfounded culprits, when in fact, the council doesn't answer to anybody. The president is beholden to the council. The council is exactly who prosecuted President Trump. Jack Smith was appointed by who? Merrick Garland. Okay, so the people that went after President Trump was Christopher Wray. It was U.S. Attorney General Barr, Rosen, and then Garland. It was Inspector General Horowitz. Those are the people that are swinging the bat. They're the people who are in control.
But
so that's you asked. That's
yeah,
who it is
for sure. Well, what you say has a certain ring of truth to it. But what I don't understand, Bill Barr seemed to be a really good guy for 4 years, or I guess 2.5 years. Until he wasn't. And when we needed him most, he seemed to fail the country. Why was the council ready to get rid of Trump?
If you look at what I want to say the mission or what the existence of the council morphed into, if you look back at 1978, we just had Nixon and Watergate, and we had a Congress and a Senate that said, geez, well, we can't have another situation where a rogue president, which was how Nixon was labeled at the time, is not accountable to anybody. So we're going to create this group of people called the SIGI, which was actually something forwarded by a guy named Marcus Raskin. If you recognize the name, he is the father of Jamie Raskin. So they created this group, and over the years, what it morphed into, and I think what its original intent was, they perceived themselves as the stewards of the country. When you see movies like The Good Shepherd is a good example with, I think Robert De Niro did that one, and Matt Damon's in it. And basically the culprit in that movie is the CIA as a dark controller of the country. In fact, that does exist. The council perceives and sees themselves as the stewards of our country, that everyone reports to them, and that they're responsible for shaping our republic and the safety of our republic, versus the American people and their elected representatives in the Congress, in the White House, and in the Supreme Court.
So how many people do you think aggregately are on the council?
Well, it's a quantifiable number. It's about 7 or 8 people. But if you look at the small group of people that control the country, we're talking it's in a couple of dozen. That's it.
And how does someone become initiated into the council?
Yeah, there's no. It's not like a Boy Scout ceremony. There's no swearing in. It is a double secret probation type of organization. Once you start really looking into it and seeing who begets who begets who, you have Comey, you have Holder, you've got a history there. When you start looking at it, that is really jaw-dropping. You can start, and I was only able to write a primer on this. I think it's only about 60 pages, and it's very, very high level. It is on intelligencer.today. It's downloadable. It's been downloaded over 70,000 times and read over 30 million. It's been pretty widely distributed. Again, it's not something many people. I see some people in the media starting to talk about it, but if you take a look at that article, it answers the question of who, what, where, when, and how. And that's one of the things that we did successfully in our defamation case. It's the reason our book, The Parallel Election, was successful, is these are frontline personal observations. These are not academic citations. These are personal. And we show pictures. We say, here's the guy. This is what this person did to us at this time. Here's the woman. Here's, we go right through and we show pictures, names, exactly what they did, and why they should be held accountable when the time comes for accountability.
So where do we find that article again? What's the title and where do we find it?
You can go to intelligencer.today, and the article is called The Council, Who's Running the United States of America. The Parallel Election, A Blueprint for Deception. You can order it from Amazon, which is probably the more popular way to order it. or you can go to parallelelection.com and order it there. There's also a video for people who are less inclined to read, and it's kind of a 28-minute summary. That's actually pretty entertaining. And what we did is we updated it. We brought it from 2020 to 2024, and we show, how election fraud is committed and how it was further perfected in 2024.
Well, to me, the 2020 election was really when, if there is a council, and I don't contest what you're saying, I have sensed that, because there seems to be some sort of higher order that is pulling the strings in this country today. I've thought that it was the FBI and the CIA. You're saying that it truly is more of a shadow government. So I'm open to receiving information about what you're talking about. But it seems like 2020 really kind of brought them out of the shadows and really forced us to acknowledge that something is going on in this country, and it's not for the American people, it's for somebody else.
Well, they stepped out and took a bow. They stepped out. They were proud of what they did. I mean, we went from 12 inspector generals in 1978 to 74 inspector generals. So if you look at every government agency, so you mentioned them, the CIA, NSA, DOD, pick an agency, any agency, what you're going to find is a dotted line from whoever the director is to an inspector general. And that dotted line runs to Inspector General Horowitz. So the bottom line is there is a control mechanism. It's not overly complex. It's not, I wouldn't call it hierarchically linear, but it's fairly simple once you look at it to see that there's definitely a command and control structure. And they've stepped out and took a bow. They're proud of what they did. If you saw after the assassination attempt of President Trump in Butler, look at the recalcitrance of Cheadle, Mayorkas, and Ray.
Yeah.
They basically thumbed their nose.
I totally agree with you.
like
I've said
children.
it here many, many times.
Yeah, they were arrogant, petulant, and they were like, "There's nothing you can do to us. We're not going to answer you. We don't answer to you." And you know what? They're right.
So how do we change it? I remember when Nixon was elected to the second term, he got more votes than any second-term president at that time. He was hugely popular. 6 months later, they were impeaching him. Is Donald Trump safe? Is he beat the council?
No, he's not safe yet. I think that President Trump, his prospective appointees, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, they're all well aware of these allegations. I'm not making these. I'm not some out in left field crazy
conspiratorialist.
Person. Yeah, conspiratorialist. A career naval officer and a career fraud specialist who's in fact worked for the government at some levels in some capacities. So this is said with great circumspect and experience, and a lot of documentation, evidentiary base. We have quite a few hundreds of federal whistleblowers. This is a case that's been waiting, and President Trump does have the means in various ways. The U.S. Supreme Court, the House Judiciary Committee, the Senate Oversight Committee, and President Trump, U.S. Attorney General. There are a number of means to suspend, temporarily, and even terminate some of these people pending investigations. And I think once that starts, the house of cards is going to come apart. And the first indication of what I'm telling you is not only truthful but factual is Merrick Garland had 3 years left on his term as FBI director, and he's resigned.
And Christopher Wray.
What did I say? Merrick Garland.
Yeah, that's all right.
I told you I've had the flu.
You're doing fine.
4 days of the flu. I'm a little bit punchy here, but Christopher Wray resigned. Now, why would he do that?
These guys seem to, I'm from Atlanta. Christopher Wray's from Atlanta. He enjoyed a very good reputation there. We have a mutual friend that was on his son's baseball team, I believe, and he was a lawyer at King & Spalding, one of the nation's largest, most prestigious law firms. They seem like they come to Washington, and they're pretty good guys. And within a number of days or weeks, they appear to change their colors.
No.
Is it a facade when they get there and then they let down their guard, or are they co-opted once they get in the swamp?
What gangster movie have you ever seen? Pick one. Casino, Goodfellas, The Godfather. What gangster isn't a benevolent father, or mother? Now that they're all benevolent. They all hide in plain sight. But Christopher Ray and Merrick Garland and William Barr are stone cold criminals. They're absolute criminals at heart. And I think once
it sounds like
they started as criminals.
It sounds like that it goes beyond criminality and transcends into treasonous behavior. Will there be accountability? Does Trump and his team of warriors, Patel and Pam Bondi, all the others, do they have the ability? One, do they have the fortitude? And two, do they actually have the ability to radically affect change?
Yes, they do. They have. They're not the only ones that have been working on this. There's a group of dedicated patriots and Americans who have been working on this and whose names will be disclosed in the future, who have collected this evidentiary base and have worked diligently for almost a decade now to remedy the situation. So Pam Bondi and Kash Patel won't be starting from scratch. They're going to be starting 10 feet from home plate.
Gregory, that does raise a question I was wanting to ask you. What is the source of your information? How have you assembled the information that you've got?
Through people I work with. 22 years in the military as an officer, Naval Academy. And then another couple of decades working in the highest levels in detecting fraud, in implementing security for the Federal Reserve, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Naval Space Warfare Command, most of the Federal Reserve banks, most of the financial institutions in New York. You make friends.
Well, I celebrate what you're doing and appreciate your efforts. I hope that we are successful to get this country back in a position to reclaim the moral high ground so that we do have a position from which we can lead the world. Otherwise, I think we're going to be in some very turbulent times. And it's just a pleasure to have you on today. I know you're recovering from the flu. I wish you well, but thank you for making the sacrifice to be here. Gregory Stenstrom, an author, elections integrity expert, and a true patriot. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show today. Before I leave you, I have to take note that Mark Zuckerberg made the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, and now he has said just this week that Meta is doing a complete 180 degrees. That he reports a report on Joe Rogan that members of the Biden administration literally yelled and screamed at his people to censor people on Facebook. And Zuckerberg now admits that that was a mistake and has redefined their policies on free expression. Do I believe him? I don't know. I would start by saying, what the hell are you talking about free expression? It's freedom of speech, dude. And why don't you just call it that? But he and his executives, they talk about free expression. I don't get it. That can't they just say freedom of speech? Can't they just call it by the First Amendment? Yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal, but it just seems odd to me that they're one of the few people that I've heard that talk about free expression. It's freedom of speech is guaranteed in the First Amendment. So I don't know what nuance they're driving at. Maybe our listeners know. Hit us up in the comments on Getter or YouTube and let us know where you think that freedom of expression comes from. Do you believe Mark Zuckerberg? I don't know, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because it's worth it. If Facebook and Instagram will change their policies and allow this country to get back to our First Amendment rights, then bring it on. So now, folks, just at 2 o'clock in just 8 more days, Donald Trump will be president of the United States. Please pray for him. please pray that we don't have any sort of a riot, any sort of rioting or anything that would disrupt the inauguration on January the 20th. Pray for our soon to become new president and that we will have a peaceful transfer of power. Thank you for joining us today. I'm John Gordon. We've told you the truth today. We'll be back next Saturday for another edition of The Truth.